The city was quiet. In a dark alleyway, as the time ticked on, it grew even more so. A lone EXO watched from the exterior of what was believed to be an extremely secure museum. Today, on the unluckiest day the entire city had, this lone EXO had knocked over 3 banks, 2 liquor stores, a pawn shop, and a jewelry store. It was a good day for the EXO. As he pulled over his clever mask, the latex fit snugly over his face. He moved his jaw around, features on the exterior of the mask changing to simulate varied bone structure. He pressed his right hand up to his throat. He changed his voice. His usually thuggish voice went up a few octaves, sounding much higher. With a few sample phrases, he noted that it sounded wispy, whereas his usual voice had a smoke to it, a kind of hiss. The new voice sounded like steam leaving a boiling teapot. Breaker 77, if anyone was around to be curious, was simply an awoken male with a broken nose, one with an annoyingly shrill voice. As an added layer, Breaker pulled another mask out. He had it set to look like an old pre-collapsed demon. The gargoyle, as he affectionately called it, had some filtration and a bit of communication capabilities. It could even stop a bullet or two thanks to a few modifications. It was a popular accessory for kids around the fall. He managed to steal a few of them, spray paint them different colors, and make a bit of flair to them. This one, however, was special. This was the gold-colored mask of the Golden Age Heister. He walked to the museum before him, his mask hidden in the folds of a jacket he pretended to need. He wore a jacket, jeans, gloves, and a scarf. To an outsider, he was a rather reclusive awoken. He walked around for an hour or two, musing on why he was even casing this joint. Soros will be making a display of their most successful weapons today at the museum. Lord Shax whispered. Anybody else, and I wouldn't even think about this. They have another group of idiots trying to buy their guns to the top. They gave Zur a bunch of those coins, told him to sell to the Soros regimes. They were turned down, quite hilariously, but they're incessantly trying to play these things. The company makes good weapons, don't believe otherwise, but the Crucible, it's not some tournament for people that get sponsorship and make money. We don't rig them. With Lord Saladin coming back soon, we need them out of the way so that A, they don't piss him off, and B, the Crucible stays clean. Breaker had laughed then, going on the usual spiel of, I don't know what you're talking about. However, Shax responded with some of his own bullshit, slamming the EXO on the wall and holding him off the ground. I know you were the Heister that Zavala is losing his mind over. The only reason they don't know too is because I told them that it might be a rogue element from Dead Orbit. Lakshmi told me you and her had this conversation about the cult and questionable hobbies. I'm smarter than you and yours give me credit for. She dropped some riddles, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I came to the conclusion that you have a stencil of Dead Orbit's logo. The logo has shown up on a few vault interiors as a diversion. You're going to Spree tomorrow. You'll hit the places I list, all financiers of Soros' competitors. You'll then go to the museum, steal the Monte Carlo displays, as well as any other guns displayed, especially the ones being auctioned. You're shitting me, Breaker had scoffed after Shax dropped him. Of course I am. Now, if a certain Heister didn't hit those places, I would be surprised, and so would Zavala. Breaker eyed over the security that was patrolling the place. Nothing major. A few drones here, a bit of armed guys there, and a group of future war cult initiates that were ogling all the firearms on display. He milled about, making small talk with various bystanders as he continued casing. After a sufficient amount of time, he put a Dead Orbit cloak on, a piece bought by Shax through proxy hunters. They reportedly lost this cloak, should anyone have been able to determine its source. Lost on Mars was a common tag to a lot of hunter cloaks, especially those staying on the Red Planet for extended periods of time. Breaker dipped into the fire exit and found an empty hallway with 0 camera coverage. His software went ballistic, processing the plans and pointing him to a fuse box. He put his mask on and rifled around the inside of the box. Instincts flooded his conscious, yanking cables and flipping switches with alarming efficiency and stealth. In the moments, the building's lights went out and the gates dropped down. Drones fell to the floor, and the comm lines the guards used shorted out in a way that overwhelmed them and knocked them unconscious. Clean, relatively quiet, and most of all shocking to bystanders. Breaker pulled out his Soros regime, also stolen, and produced several transmat devices from the pockets on his cloak. The plan was simple: break the glass, subdue the bystanders, and leave the Soros displays intact while stealing everything else. His voice returned to its usual tone, since he had the mask on. After all, if he didn't sound like the Golden Age Heister, then who would this crazy awoken be? Breaker was more irritated that he'd only be paid by the nature of not having his identity revealed to Zavala. He booted the door open, fired the regime into the ceiling, and laughed with his trademark enthusiasm. The laughter was mostly stemmed from venting frustration, however. Everybody on the ground! It's the Golden Age Heister here, ready to knock out my competition and do so with flair. He saw people dashing the locked doors, finding security fields holding them in the room. "You're stuck in here with me until my job's done. Everybody plays it cool. We get out of here in one piece. And nobody has to get hurt." The women shrieked. The men nervously sat down. Breaker went into a form of trance. He slapped the devices down as he darted around the room, making sure they were rigged to offload into a Suros warehouse. Without even as much as a thought on doing so, he shouted civilians in panic, making them focus on the fact that he had the gun and they didn't. "The FWC initiates, however, might be a problem," he mused. Almost as if on cue, Breaker felt a bullet impact an armor plate on his back. He turned, aiming the regime and revving its internal mechanisms. The one with the gun was holding a custom Chance hand cannon, its barrel smoking. Breaker stared through the mask, trying his hardest to burn the young initiate's brain out. "Look, kid, your cult's all about war." The Heister spoke in a hypnotic tone. "Live to fight in one by putting your face on the floor and the gun on the ground." His voice escalated as he talked, becoming a roaring command as he finished. The kid trembled, and Breaker watched the boy's finger twitch. In a moment, Breaker did what he was built to do. Breaker broke the boy. The boy's arm wasn't rigidly held. He was simply holding a firearm. He hadn't known how to handle it. Probably was just now being trained with it. Breaker slapped it away, kicked the boy's shin, and knocked him to a knee through sheer force. He grabbed the gun, wrestled it, and pointed at the kid's face with a blur of motion. Breaker was going a little slower than he felt was usual. If he had done it too fast, he would have betrayed his true face. "On the ground. Now." The kid screamed for a moment, the disarm barely registering in his mind as reality. Breaker nodded, and the kid took off his holster and handed it over. Producing a bit of wire, Breaker fastened the boy's hands together and put on the holster with relative safety. "Anybody else want to be a hero?" Breaker swept his gun across the room and heard a woman scream in fear. Good to hear silence after that. "Everybody behind the Suros case, now." Corralling the hostages, he put them behind the Suros case for two reasons. One reason, that it was big, ostentatious display, had sufficient cover, would keep them safe in case of a panic alarm was hit and someone was on the way. The second reason, however, was to leave a message. Any team sent to evacuate the poor hostages would find that the Suros display was left untouched. This could mean that he didn't value Suros weaponry, however. He needed a way to make it clear what he was doing. "Now," he shouted, "everyone just look and see that Suros display. You know what could have prevented this? If you all had bought some of their rifles. You wouldn't have anything to worry about if you did. I mean, I certainly would have thought twice if I saw everyone with a Suros rifle." "Why, you ask?" "Because if everyone had an ADM-40 auto rifle or even an MKB-51 shotgun, man, that would have been something scary." "I'm doing you a public service, robbing the competition. Their guns are only good for weapon parts." Breaker was a bank robber, not a salesman. Siren sounded off, and Breaker turned away from the crowd to babysit the transmat devices. "Remember," Shax added before letting him go the day prior, "no casualties. The city needs to talk about how Suros paid you to be an ad campaign and cripple their competition. I'll have Archite modify some of our talks with them, so get out clean. And casualties, no matter from whom, and you go straight to Zavala." As the devices finished pilfering the cases, he smirked inwardly. So far, nothing was going wrong, and nothing would. It would be a clean job with little backlash, save, of course, the problem of being blackmailed by Shax. Breaker mused. There is an upside. He watched the devices report to his heads-up display, and he genuinely smiled as he watched a host of exotic weaponry begin loading into the warehouse that was set up for him to offload into. However, he took a single hard light in Monte Carlo. "They got dismantled for R&D, the XO said as he dipped into an alleyway and changed into his civilian appearance. "Suros won't actually know the number of things they paid for, so who'll know if one or two goes missing?" Back in the tower, however, his companions were handling similarly dubious tasks for the Vanguard. A journal had found its way into the hands of a mute hunter, and Ikora requested that a rambunctious warlock see her.